Welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast, where we tackle your toughest leadership challenges and share practical tools to help you lead with impact.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. Today's episode is a short teaching segment from our free monthly workshop series led by Humanergy Master Coach Corey Fernandez. Corey walks through what feedback really is, why it matters, and how to use it in ways that strengthen performance and trust. If you'd like to join us for future workshops, you can find upcoming dates at humanergy.com. Let's dig in.
First thing, just a simple definition, right? This is a definition of feedback, right? It is that process of offering our observations, suggestions, performance improvements, and so on that we can share with another human being to help each other strengthen performance. Now, it comes with, in some cases, some wins for organizations and teams, right? When we're doing this work well, and we crave feedback and we're getting a great feedback experience in our organization, it has impact. It can lead to performance gains. It can truly accelerate our learning and growth. It can be a great source of motivation, right? Give us energy, help us feel more productive when we know we're focused on the right things or we have something to reach for. It's also a key ingredient in high trust relationships. So we might not think about that part all the time, but it truly can be a difference maker in how we build trust with one another. And it absolutely can bring us more meaning and purpose in our work, right? It helps us see how we impact the world around us, knowing that we get to show up and have impact. Now, on the flip side, though, some of us have been in teams or organizations where perhaps we have reasons to loathe feedback. This is tricky, right? So when feedback isn't applied well, when it's poorly designed or too much critique is involved, it can actually lead to performance getting worse. This idea when we are in environments where we're constantly feeling like we're under criticism, it can actually lead to fatigue, anxiety, and so on. It can actually lower trust, right? And we've kind of seen you think about toxic environments and so on. Feedback might be used, but it truly can actually damage relationships in those types of environments. It can be an amplifier for our biases and certainly our subjective ways that we see the world. And so I'll kind of share some tips around that today for how we kind of take a sidestep around some of that work. And it can sometimes feel like an absolute verdict on our value. We feel like it's an absolute when we kind of receive it, and we don't often see it as a data point all the time and something to learn from and grow from. It can feel very, very much like an absolute that's being thrown our way. And so, we kind of are in this space right now because there's a slippery slope between doing this really well and doing this poorly. We have to ask ourselves, why should we continue to invest in getting better at feedback, right? Wouldn't we be better off maybe just shying away from this stuff on the screen? But we know there's tremendous value. You listed it in the chat box today, the importance of feeling seen and valued, that we are making contributions. It absolutely is a difference maker in performance. And to be honest with you, when done well, and the reason why we can strive for it is it changed people's lives. I can count probably 3, 4, 5 instances in my career where somebody in one instance changed my life, and I still think about the feedback that they offered me and the way they shared it with me, and it set me up for much bigger impact in my career. And so that's why we want to make sure we're using this time to really get clear on how we can do this better and better in our workplaces. So again, y'all kind of stated the importance of getting this right in the chat box because it absolutely is a difference maker. And so I think job number one, there's going to be 2 of these jobs today. Job number 1 is to make sure we're trying to limit surprises. Feedback shouldn't be something that all of a sudden shows up in the world and it kind of shocks us, kind of shakes us to our core and so on. In fact, when we do a lot of 360 work and offer and engage clients in 360 feedback processes, we help them understand that it is natural for us to receive feedback where we might see feedback as a shock or a surprise to us. Some feedback might make us feel angry or frustrated. We immediately get defensive. We want to push back on it. That is natural. Now, with leadership in teams and organizations, we can do the work to try to limit this experience of walking with Sarah. We want to make sure that we're using feedback in ways and using it well enough and frequent enough where we can get to acceptance faster and we don't feel like it's such a shock or in a reason to be defensive and so on. And so what we try to think about is this is a continuum, right? If feedback in a team experience is infrequent, unpredictable, and reactive on the left-hand side, it's more likely to create moments of shock. defensiveness, irritability, and so on. When we are using feedback in frequent, predictable, and proactive ways, it's an expected routine that we can depend on to improve our performance. It's going to lessen the shock wave, lessen some of the anger or frustration that we might feel by getting new information that seems like it's coming out of the blue. Okay, so this continuum is important because, there are times when we can look back in our careers and perhaps we were on the left-hand side where feedback only showed up for annual reviews, or it seemed like feedback was happening days or weeks removed from a behavior or result. And that's not necessarily, that's kind of like, the minimum, right? But the more we increase feedback experiences to the right side of that continuum, where not only it's an annual review, but for one-to-ones that are taking place weekly and monthly, for team meetings, for project debriefs, and so on, we're regularly using feedback to increase the value we can bring to the organization, our teams. It becomes a difference maker. It becomes less of a shock. It becomes something that we crave. Okay, so that's job number one. We want to limit the shock waves and try to make it more of a frequent experience that, the team depends on, that it's an expectation for participating on the team. Now, job number two, I think, is to get clear on two questions. The left-hand question here, what do you want to achieve with the feedback? What's the purpose that you're using the feedback for? And the question number two, what delivery method is going to be most appropriate? Okay, so if we're thinking about these two questions, it can be a great way to really get clear on, again, why we're using the feedback, how we're going to deliver it to have the best impact possible. So we'll start with the left-hand side of the screen first here. And in terms of what do I want to achieve, there are times where feedback can be really useful to strengthen values and culture. There are times where it can be used to drive performance improvements, of course. And there are times where it can be really helpful to build trust via self-disclosure. So I'm going to speak to all three of these things here. And then we'll move to that second part of the screen on the delivery method. But starting here with strengthening values and culture, all of us in a team and organizational setting have values. We have cultures that are a part of our lives that we participate in. Now, values often sit on the wall. They aren't truly embedded in how we actually go about our work and operate. And so what I see oftentimes is this is an example of my kids in elementary school where their mascot is the Norseman, but they actually have a tradition, a routine around celebrating the values on a daily, weekly basis. And so N stands for nice, O stands for organized, R stands for responsible, S stands for safe, and E stands for engaged. And so when teachers see their students demonstrating these values, they recognize them and they're able to celebrate them right on the spot. And they get stickers and so on, but it's a way to reinforce what's expected of them and bring the culture to life intentionally and not just by chance. And so that's a really, in some ways, like a low risk way to offer feedback on a real regular basis by intentionally celebrating and showing that people are actually, following through on what's expected and bringing the values to life. And I think a lot of organizations, we miss opportunities like this, and elementary schools are probably actually excelling at strengthening values and culture more so than how we just do it in our organizations because we miss these opportunities. But these types of things are really important. And again, this is a low risk way to reinforce what's expected and what we want to see more of. Next up, when we think about trying to drive performance improvements with people and teams, project teams, and so on, we love this framework on the right-hand side. Some of y'all have had experience with the sandwich framework and so on, that type of model. But we love this framework for delivering performance improving feedback. And so it really starts with the top row there. When we talk about keep doing this, there's likely something that people are doing already that we want to make sure we reinforce, that we make visible. Keep doing certain things because it's actually leading to success. It's delivering value. The next thing is we want to state what else is expected. What other results are we needing to see as we kind of make sure people are focused on continuing to make improvements going forward? And are there anything you can start doing, skills, practices, training, to close in on those results? And is there anything you should stop doing, behaviors or practices that are getting in the way of results? And we like to think about this kind of garden, metaphor and so on. in terms of think about the soil, right? There's likely some things in the soil that are already leading to a productive garden. We want to keep feeding that thing. That's important. There's things that we probably want to get out of the garden going forward. So what else do we need to do to get there? We likely need to include some different seeding, right? Seed the garden a little bit differently, perhaps add some different things that we're looking to harvest later on. And occasionally we should be weeding and pulling things out. But if we spend too much time weeding, we become overly critical and we're missing opportunities to strengthen and reinforce and provide nutrition to the garden and help it grow. Okay, we love this model for delivering feedback, and it's a great way to engage people in a conversation. Hey, Quay, reflecting on the board presentation you delivered yesterday, what are you doing that's working? Why do you think it's working? Right? Help the person actually self-assess their performance. Where do you think you need to go to continue to make progress? Right? Helping her see that future result. What should you start doing to accelerate toward that goal? What do you think you should stop doing that's potentially holding you back? So again, this framework it's a great model to actually be able to harness feedback in an appropriate way. It's future focused. It helps people really see things they can reach for, and where necessary, avoid things that are holding them back. But it's done in a very supportive, productive way with purpose and very intentional. Now, the next thing I'll say is this other way we can use feedback is to build trust via self-disclosure, okay? And there's two parts to this. The first part is actually using feedback that highlights specific behaviors. Now, it's important that it's objective and it's evidence-based and it's not just an interpretation. So there's a difference on the screen, right? If I see somebody kind of holding their phone when I'm talking, I can see that when I'm talking, you pick up your phone and start thumbing through your screen. That's objective evidence. My interpretation is you're so disrespectful, right? And if I might want to say that, but if I actually lead with that, it's going to put somebody on the defensive. And it's not very helpful because they don't know what is disrespectful. I'm missing an opportunity to be specific about the behavior. Now, part two of that is my experience of the behavior. If I see somebody thumbing through their phone and so on, and it feels like I'm being ignored, it's important that I share how that behavior is impacting me, how I'm feeling about that behavior. And that's the part about my self-disclosure that's really important because it's showing somebody that their behavior has an impact. And I want them to be able to see that because now they can better understand where I'm coming from or what my experience is and has the opportunity to adjust. And so here's some examples of what this might look like. When you stopped the discussion to ask if everyone was okay with the tight deadline, I felt respected, which made me feel more motivated to meet the goal. That can help you reinforcing this behavior going forward. And they know that's a positive experience for me. When you took the lead to contact that difficult client directly, I felt incredibly supported, which made me feel that I can rely on you for tough situations. Your initiative is making a difference in our client satisfaction. There's a great potential for you to manage some of our most trusted client relationships. Again, I'm speaking to specific behaviors and how they impact the world around me. Okay. And then this comes more like constructive criticism. When you sent that email late Friday afternoon asking for the report by Monday morning, I felt stressed about my weekend plans, which made me feel like my personal time wasn't valued. When the document you handed in had several simple typos, I felt frustrated, which made me feel like I needed to spend extra time proofreading everything myself. As soon as you address these quality issues, we'll both be able to spend our time understanding our customer data and prioritizing higher value work. This is really important with these two pieces, specific behaviors and the impact they have on us, because oftentimes people don't intend to have those impacts on people, but when we help them understand what's happening, they have the opportunity to adjust. And it's going to be one of those ways that, people are going to be less defensive because we're leading with behaviors, not our interpretation of those behaviors. Okay. So now we'll shift a little bit over to delivery method. We'll spend just a little time on this just to speak. There's different things that we can be leaning on here just to make sure we're able to do this in more consistent, frequent fashions, because I understand schedules sometimes feel like they can prevent us from offering feedback to one another. But certainly real time is something that we would highly recommend. In fact, real time is something that can encourage a two-way dialogue. We just want to throw feedback at somebody and expect them to sit with it. They might have questions. They might be curious. It's a great way to engage people in a dialogue, an exploration of our experience, of what we need to see further from somebody else, and so on. And if it's going to be written, I would recommend, highly recommend, that we schedule a check-in to ensure understanding. Oftentimes, words can mean different things to different people. The intent of written information can get misconstrued and so on. So it's important to loop back around and have a way to ensure understanding and make sure people can tease out any questions and so on, so we can make sure the full value of the feedback is realized. Video is an excellent way to provide feedback as well. If we know we're not going to be seeing somebody for a couple months or maybe a week and so on, we can offer feedback in video form, and it can be short, timely bites to make sure that time doesn't pass in such a distance where the feedback becomes less effective, and we can set that up really well. And there's some experts here from the TechSmith world. Claire is one of them, and Danielle, and so on. They provide screen capture technology and so on, and it can be a great way to provide feedback when we want to make sure we're capturing a screen and so on, and providing our thoughts and guidance for future performance or future improvements in these types of ways as well. And so again, if I know a gap of time is going to happen before I can talk with somebody, using video, using screen capture can be an excellent way to make sure we're not losing that opportunity and so on. And then the last piece I want to speak to here is just around our choice between how we share or how we engage. There's times where I can lead with my perspective and I can offer what I'm seeing and kind of put that out there in the world. There's other times I can be open to somebody else's perspective first and allow them to share with me how they feel they're performing, how they feel they've walked through a different project recently, or how they've kind of would evaluate, their own performance in something. And that idea of being open and to somebody else's perspective first really invites a great dialogue. And now chances are I can see how well do our perceptions match up with one another. How can I potentially close some gaps between us if their perspective doesn't match mine? But if it does match mine, I might have to say very little, because oftentimes people are very self-aware, and I'm just giving them the chance to actually open up and for us to have a dialogue around where they think they're at and where I think they're at and so on. And so I just offer, it's not always us having to lead and put our perspective out there first. There's great value in actually being open and sharing and inviting other people to assess where they're at with their own performance, their own behavior, and so on.
That was the Humanergy Leadership Podcast. Make sure you like and subscribe, and visit humanergy.com for many more resources.